then let's officially move into the week 2 NFL winners and losers. Andrew, who do you have as your winners?
Yeah, so as my winners, I have the Browns and the Colts. The Browns for maybe less obvious reasons than the Colts, but I think the Browns getting destroyed by like almost each and every team that they play. Obviously, they didn't get destroyed in week 1, but like it's probably a positive thing because you're not looking to Joe Flacco as a guy who is going to even get you competitive in this division. He's probably the bridge quarterback, and the bridge is possibly to these two backup quarterbacks behind him, at least one of the two, hopefully. For Cleveland Browns fans. And I don't think you want to see Joe Flacco as a Browns fan any longer than you have to. He's probably as good as you think Joe Flacco is at this point. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. And the worse he performs, the quicker you see the likes of Shadur Sanders or
Dylan Gabriel?
Dylan Gabriel. Almost
Yeah.
called him Bo Nix, Oregon. So yeah, I think that you want to see either of those two quarterbacks as quickly as you'd like, and then at that point, if neither of them work out, the quicker you see them, the better, because then you can kind of decide as a franchise where you're going from here, and if you have the number 1 overall draft pick, what you want to do with that. So I think the worse the Browns look, the better, and then obviously the Colts. I thought they were a little bit fluky after week 1 because it was the Dolphins. The Dolphins are one of the worst teams in the NFL, coming from a Dolphins fan. So and hopefully that can turn around. But the Colts look genuinely good. Their offense is hasn't punted since the season started. Daniel Jones, it looks like there's been a revival, and that stat is a little bit overvalued because they also haven't turned the ball over, but they have had a turnover on downs. So take that as you will. But the Colts do look really good. They look like they're the best team in the AFC South right now, and it's interesting because the fact that what's happening with the Texans right now, their offense looks super stagnant. CJ Stroud looks like his sophomore slump is turning into a junior slump, and what will we see from him going forward? And then the rest of those teams in that division, it feels like the Colts are the best one out of those teams right now. So you look at the division, you see a world where the Colts are possibly winning that division, making the playoffs. Not rather easily, but there's definitely a path for it at this point. So you like what you see out of the Colts, and then from the Browns' perspective, like the worse Joe Flacco does, probably better for that organization at this point.
Yeah, the Colts escaped against the Broncos there. I guess they got that late call and they were able to win that game. I see where you're coming from. They're top of the AFC, of their division in the AFC. And yeah, those other teams have questions. So I get where you're coming from there. The Browns thing, I guess there is always a positive in the slew of negatives that they end up having. I feel bad for their defense. Their defense is still really good. It's just their offense implodes as the game goes on, and the defense just can't handle it. They're in a weird position because I guess if you draft 2 quarterbacks in the same draft, you want to see them even earlier than you would just with 1 QB. So, like I said, we're going to see, like I said before the season, we're going to see both those guys at some point play. I think we're going to see Shadur Sanders start for a handful of games this year. I have winners, 49ers and the Buffalo Bills. 49ers because I think personally, I underestimated exactly what they were going to be able to do in week 2. Losing George Kittle, losing Brock Purdy, Mac Jones going out there throwing 3 touchdowns. I get it's against the Saints, but the Saints look very competent right now. I know they're 0-2, but I think they look pretty decent. And they were able to keep the game close. So shout out to the Saints. But I like that. I think there's a little bit of, hey, can Mac Jones actually keep this team afloat? Can you put in or plug and play and put in a backup QB and still have some success if you're the 49ers? Haven't really seen that as much. I know there's a lot of Brock Purdy's got a lot of help around him, but in the last 6-7 years, we haven't really seen a backup QB for the 49ers come in and keep them afloat. So I think that that's a really good sign. And the Bills, you're 2-0, and if you look at the other 2-0 teams in the AFC, I think they're pretty clearly the ones that at least look legit. We just talked about the Colts, but the Bills look like they're serious. They got that big win over the Ravens in week 1. And then they just dominated the Jets as they normally would. But their schedule the rest of the way is also super easy. And I think that is something to point out. They could end up going 7-0 or starting 7-0.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much pushback. I think the fact that the Niners have lost so many people I think they have 7 either starters or rotational players that have picked up some form of injury. George Kittle was on an injured reserve, and Brock Purdy's going to be out for at least 3 weeks at this point, or at least that's what the initial report was. So those are obviously unfortunate. But Mac Jones came in and didn't play a bad game. He definitely started out slow, and the Saints defense being on the field for so long, like with not a very confident offense, is unfortunate. But I get a win is a win in the NFL, and the 49ers came into the season with the easiest schedule relative to last season. So they have some easy games coming up. I don't know exactly what that schedule looks like, but they're on the up. And then obviously the Bills are the Bills. I never want to give them too much praise, but they genuinely look like one of the best teams in the NFL. And I had them winning the Super Bowl coming in this year. So Josh Allen is proven at least that part of the take, right?
Cautious optimism there with the Bills being your Super Bowl pick and not wanting to give them too much praise. I should have had the schedule pulled up. I do now. Dolphins, Saints, Pats, Falcons, Panthers. Then they get the Chiefs. Then they get the Dolphins again. So they're going to start off this season, I think, 7-0 if they can just take care of business. So they're going to go 7-0 going into the Chiefs. Let's go to your losers.
Yeah, so my losers are the Bears and the Vikings, two teams that played on Monday Night Football the week before. I think that for both these organizations, it looks like they might have a quarterback issue. Super unfortunate because of the fact that, at least for the Vikings, start off with them, they came into last season not knowing what Sam Darnold was going to look like. And then he ends up getting them 14 wins, and they look like a very competent team, not as much in the playoffs, but still they had the option to pay him or to not. And then they shipped him off to Seattle. And now Seattle looks not half bad. And the Vikings, they definitely have some question marks. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy had that one great quarter, led the comeback, but he's had 7 bad quarters, and now he's injured. So what does that look like going forward? I've never been a big believer in J.J. McCarthy just in general. I came into the season not thinking he was going to be very good, and we'll see where we go from here. But I don't know. Like I've just never been super high on him, and he looked absolutely awful. Like it was on primetime too, so everybody got to watch it, but like he was just missing throws left and right. Justin Jefferson looked upset at points. Like there was a couple balls that looked like he just didn't have a very good day in general, and it took a couple sacks that were kind of funny, and it just in general didn't play very well. So I think the Vikings could have possible big issues there, especially because they're a team that's built to win now, and having to waste a year on a quarterback that you thought was the future and might not be would be super unfortunate for them coming off a 14-win season. And then for the Bears, Caleb Williams, there really needs to be some evaluation on that, because the fact that the Lions came into this game kind of down in the dumps, their defense didn't even play that bad in week 1, but still, you think Ben Johnson, you think of all the highlight plays that the Lions had last year, and you think that might translate to the Bears, and it just flat out hasn't. Caleb Williams hasn't looked very good either. So you want to see more from him, and that was just an absolute like beat down. The Lions wanted to send a message in this game. Ben Johnson being their ex-offensive coordinator and now the Bears head coach, they ran up the score on them for good measure, but going for it on a 4th and goal that they just didn't need to. But still, like that team their defense are more on offense than they are on defense, I think. And you really need to start evaluating whether Caleb Williams is the guy. And I think he gets through the end of this year and possibly into next year, but it looks like a long road ahead for Bears fans going forward.
Yeah, I was preaching Caleb Williams a little bit before the season. That definitely doesn't look good. Bit of a tough time. I know the Lions were coming into the game 0-1, but and they had that loss to the Packers, but I felt like they really felt like they wanted to win that game. A lot of negative media coverage around the Browns or around the Bears post game, excuse me, and it was just a slew of everything. It's coming down right now, but I think I still got faith in Caleb Williams. The JJ McCarthy stuff is really, really tough because yeah, you're right. 7 bad quarters, 1 decent quarter. And now the Vikings in a win now mode are going to start Carson Wentz for the next few games or the foreseeable future in the big 2025. That's a rough spot to be in. Not where you want to go. Would have been nice to have Sam Darnold on the roster at this point. My losers are a little bit different. It's not teams, but it's veteran QBs. We talked a little bit about the Browns. You had them as the winner. I have Joe Flacco as the specific loser in that, where I don't think he's going to start very many more games for the Browns. And then vet QBs, Russell Wilson has a late career game renaissance against the Cowboys, and they still come out as losers. They're going to be, or they are 0-2. And I just don't really see him finishing out the season as the team starter. And I think that that's a win that you really would like to get to stay competitive and to keep your job if you're Russell Wilson. And it's not his fault, like by any means, in any stretch of the imagination. He had one really, really bad play towards the end, but he played well for the game. And I think that we're going to see Jackson Dart at some point before the midway part of the season. And then I have the future of the tush push being a loser, because I think that it was on full display how I'm not somebody who thinks that it should be eliminated because it's unfair or because not everybody can do it or because the Eagles do it at such a high rate. I think that it was on full display that this cannot be refed properly, and I think that that's where it gets dangerous. It seems like it's not as you would think a player safety issue, but it seems like that players are kind of okay doing it from that perspective. So that is taken out. I think there's two reasons why a play would be or something would be eliminated: player safety, and then the other is it just cannot be refed properly. The Eagles are jumping off sides, and then the other team is lined up in the neutral zone. And then there's a scrum, and if there's a fumble, they cannot rule on it properly, and they can't even see the line of scrimmage properly, and they being the refs, to make sure that this play is officiated the way that it should be or needs to be. I think that being on full display in a Super Bowl rematch will have a lot of people pointing to it in the NFL offseason, and I do think eventually this play will be outlawed. And I think it just comes down to the officiating. I think that kind of sucks. I think from a fan's perspective, you're not missing a ton because they're doing it on 2nd and 1. Everybody's doing it on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. There's plenty of teams that have a lot of success with this. The Bills do. A lot of different QBs who are bigger have plenty of success. I mean, it's not something the Eagles just do. I just think it's a play that'll be eliminated eventually. I think I wish that defensive players could also push, but they do in those plays anyway too. So I think it's gone. I think it's going to be gone.
Yeah. I don't think that the vote was like relatively close this year, and I don't see a world in which they don't continue to vote on it, and at some point it gets banned from the NFL. Just because of the fact that it also like Roger Goodell is a big on like making the product relatively. I mean,
Yeah.
what they're doing with Red Zone doesn't make the product more watchable, but in certain terms, making the product more watchable, and that plays objectively or yeah, objectively one of the worst plays to watch in the NFL. Like it is, what's coming, and like it just as an NFL fan, like I don't really care too much about the Chiefs or the Eagles from any particular perspective. Like it's just not fun. Like, and I think that that's part of like what the NFL is trying to market. Like they went from the no fun league, and they're trying to rebuild their image. And it's not one of those plays that anybody really enjoys watching unless you are an Eagles fan or a fan of the team that's running it. And it's becoming so consistent that even like on those like primary downs, like I've seen it ran on 2nd and 1 at this point, and that's not. I don't think that's really healthy for the game from a watchable perspective. So I definitely think that at some point GMs are just gonna be like, when they vote on it, it's gonna go at some point. And it is unfortunate because it is literally just a play where it's like, we can do this better than you. Why does it have to go? But it's whatever at this point. I don't really care to see it stay or go. So, and then veteran QBs, definitely a rough week for them, especially Joe Flacco, particularly talking about the Browns. I mean, it's getting pretty close to time to hang it up for him. And then Russell Wilson, maybe leading into one of the winners or another loser that I have. But Russell Wilson had a phenomenal game, a really good bounce back game relative to how he played in week 1. And then still like that game was one of the craziest games that I've watched. That generally just going back and forth, the Cowboys tying it up with like getting the ball back with 20 seconds left to go in that game. So a really fun game to watch, but probably not great for Russell Wilson's starting chances the rest of his career, probably.
So unfortunate too, because the late field goal tied up for the Cowboys. It's just you can't control that at a certain point. But just one more thing on the tush push really quick before we get to the honorable mentions. It's really just not that the Eagles are the only ones doing it too. If we're just looking at it from like a product of the NFL perspective, a lot of other teams are also doing it. I think if you want to run a QB sneak that's not like where you don't have both of your running backs or a tight end pushing you, I think that's obviously fine. Brady did it for all those years. But just from a product perspective, yeah, it's kind of eliminated the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th and 1 like play calling and the stakes of that. It's automatic. And I think it really kind of also sucked that you do see a lot of defensive teams end up selling out in a specific way. I forget which team did it on the goal line last year against the Eagles, but where it was kind of going crazy. There was a ton of different penalties. But the Chiefs tried to give them a first down on 2nd and 1 to keep the game alive yesterday. And obviously the Eagles were going to decline it. It's not just specifically the Eagles. I do want to make that pretty clear. It's just, is it good for the game? Like as far as like the product, probably not. But If it's not reffed correctly, that's the biggest thing. If there's something wrong with the way that it's being reffed, and the defense is at a clear disadvantage as far as they can't push their own players, then I think at a certain point you have to look at it, and I think they'll end up getting it out of the game, and it's fine. Like you said, if it stays or goes, it's not the end of the world either way.
Yeah, and then, I mean, moving into at least my
Yeah.
honorable mentions, I have like a lot of different losers from this week. I'll list them off and then maybe go into like some sort of depth about each of the teams. I have the Giants, Steelers, Jets, Bengals, and Chiefs, all in here for like probably separate reasons. The Giants, I think that the Russell Wilson, as much as we just talked about it, like possibly like being bad for Russell Wilson is like and his starting chances. I think that this win was enough for like I saw some Giants fans online being like, "This is the happiest I've been as a Giants fan in like 3 years. Like you never saw this competent of an offense." And I think that's like an overstatement because of how they performed literally the week before. But if the Giants, like if New York media isn't on Brian Dable about making the switch, I think that is actually worse for the Giants as a franchise because you want to see what you have in Jackson Dart. And the longer Russell Wilson stays as their quarterback, I think probably the worse for the Giants. I think probably the opposite of what I was talking about with the Browns. Or like maybe the exact same situation where you don't really want to see Russell Wilson do well because what does that get you like in the NFC? Like I think that they are the third best team in this conference at the very best. And I don't know if with at least with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. So getting to see your young quarterback, I think, as a fan of a team is always exciting. You might want to see that for the Giants. The Steelers, Aaron Rodgers looks old. He is taking a lot of sacks that like a lot of younger quarterbacks could avoid, and he can make a lot of throws, but he can't make every throw anymore. And that Seahawks game, you wanted to see more out of him. He looks old and immobile. The Jets, Justin Fields had his like annual like not halfway decent. He had a good game in week 1, but he looked like in the 3 quarters he did play, he didn't look very good, and then he got injured. The Bengals, they lost on their quarterback again. Joe Burrow's injured, and it's partially because of the fact that like people were saying online, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are making millions of dollars, and that offensive line is still in shambles, as well as the defense. And then the Chiefs starting 0-2 for the first time since 2014. We'll get into that a little bit later, but it just hasn't been a good start for them. And it's not just the fact that they're 0-2. They've played good teams, but the way that they're 0-2, their offense hasn't looked good in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, if you've made it all the way to this part of the Clipped NFL winners and losers videos, make sure that you subscribe. The reason that the Bengals aren't one of our losers is because we have a specific video that we're going to be talking about them, and it's going to be later on in this full episode as well. But yeah, the Bengals season, again, defined by a Joe Burrow injury. Maybe they'll be able to stay afloat. Probably not. Did you had the extra winners too?
Yeah, I have the extra winners.
Yeah,
Lions, Ravens, Falcons. I think that the Falcons have a competent quarterback and probably one of the better ones in that draft class. It is a stacked one, 6 quarterbacks in that draft class: Drake May, Jaden Daniels, all those good guys. Caleb Williams, maybe not in the lower echelon of that. JJ McCarthy also in there. But the Falcons look like they have one in Michael Penix. I think they made the right decision benching Kirk Cousins for him. Unfortunately, they are still paying him $40 million to sit on the bench, but Penix looks good. And besides not being able to finish a couple of those drives, the run game also is much improved from that week 1 game against the Buccaneers. So they look really good, and I think that they're a playoff team. The Ravens, you never know how a team's going to come out after like such I feel like an emotionally draining loss. They're still way better than the Browns, but the fact that they just really put it on them and didn't really let the Bills game that they just let slip out of their grasp really affect them that much, I think is good for them as a Super Bowl contending team. And then the Lions, obviously there was a ton of talk, even from us in the sports media after week 1 about like maybe them missing their coordinators and Ben Johnson being part of the key of that offense, but their offense is still good. And I think that it was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking where it was possibly an overreaction Monday that got to a lot of people. So the Lions still look good. They're definitely still a playoff team, and we'll see where they go from there. But I think that getting the monkey off their back a little bit is definitely good for them.